Monday. I would want to thank the State Treasurer, who I'll introduce in just a minute. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Let you know that we're going to let the Treasurer speak for a little while and tell us about some of the programs that she's working on, and then have an opportunity to take some of your questions through the Q&A. So feel free to do that. Add those as you want. Treasurer Goldberg, it's so nice to see you.
Hi, Greg. How are you?
Good. It's been a while. I think we haven't seen each other.
I think that it's been a while since I've seen a lot of people.
Well, that's true. At least all of us, right? As opposed to just part of us. So we're really grateful to have you here. Just briefly, I don't want to spend a lot of time on your bio and let people give you more of an opportunity to talk, but Deb Goldberg is the Massachusetts State Treasurer and Receiver, first elected in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. In that role, we all think of state treasurers as being a person who's responsible for cash and debt management, unclaimed property, but also many other things that fall under her umbrella, including the Mass School Business Authority, Building Authority, which is really important to so many of us, pension reserves, State Board of Retirement, the State Lottery Commission, the Alcohol Beverages Control Commission. I definitely have a couple questions for you about that one today. The Mass Clean Water Trust, and one of the things I know you want to talk about today, the Office of Economic Empowerment, which is an office that you started. Prior to being treasurer, you served for 6 years in the Brookline Board of Selectmen, which is where you and I first met, and that you've also have a long history and experience in the retail business, including through the Stop and Shop company. So, Treasurer, I'm going to let you kick it off, and then we'll be back with some questions.
Okay, great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So, I mean, whenever I speak with chambers, I feel completely at home because I don't think I've ever felt any differently my whole life, no matter what I've been doing, other than me being a retailer and me really being a grocer. So I actually, over the years of me having been treasurer, people have heard an awful lot how I look at things very similarly as being a retailer, being a business person. And I think that brings a really good perspective to the treasurer's office, because I think sometimes we as business people, and I'll put that hat on, don't necessarily feel that people at the State House or people in the agencies that we deal with understand the day-to-day business challenges that people confront in their jobs and in their work and in their small businesses. And so that's something that when I first arrived, and I looked at that we have 13 different areas under state government in the treasurer's office, I actually developed a common mission for each and every area, and basically said, number one, our mission is customer service. And we are here because we want to make people's lives better, and it is our job to do so. And I have incoming new employees orientations several times a year. And I literally point out the window and say, that's who you work for. So that really comes from my business background. And it's true. And our common mission, which is most obvious in the Office of Economic Empowerment, but is true for every single area under the Treasurer's office, is to create economic stability. And that has been even more important that this past year or so than in my entire tenure. And in a way, although it made it more challenging in terms of workload, I actually was president of all the treasurers of the country and tasked with weekly meetings, helping every state navigate through the challenges of COVID. So I developed a really in-depth perspective on making sure that we are economically stable here in Massachusetts, but throughout the country. And in fact, when I was interviewed on CNBC in December, and I was challenged that there were those in the Senate who felt that states and localities, only the blue states and the blue localities needed COVID relief dollars. I said, you know me, I speak straight out, Greg. I said, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Every state has been impacted by COVID. Every state has had expenses related to COVID. Every state needs support and every state needs relief. So, but the rationale, and we are focused today because we have developed a program this year on working particularly with business people on how we get the economy going again, how we help small businesses and how we help people get back into jobs, get businesses going again. I think what's kind of fascinating by the governor's timing of turning the switch on June 15th, which was an acceleration of what businesses had anticipated, is that there are enormous business challenges today to fill jobs. There isn't one part of the state where I've talked to people where there isn't that problem. And there are problems today for people to be able to get out of their homes to take those jobs. And most particularly for women, where there's a disproportionate impact by the lack of childcare. So the concept behind the Office of Economic Empowerment was to have a policy arm in the Treasurer's office. You noted that that Mass School Building Authority is here. Well, that mission is not just bricks and mortar, for example. It actually is creating the environments where kids can have access to the tools they need in order to learn the skills to fill our jobs. I mean, that's the real connection. That's economic stability and economic opportunity. Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission, you brought it up, but the reality is that talk about a direct connection to healthy cities and towns. That is an economic driver, and working collaboratively in order to support that process and those businesses while still guarding public safety. There is a balance. Has been very critical during the pandemic, very, very critical. But we created the Office of Economic Empowerment in order to specifically address issues and problems. Particularly what I was driven by was the lack of what hit me, I'm gonna back up a little. What hit me in 2008 is how many people did not understand the subprime mortgage crisis. Day-to-day people were told, you can put a couple dollars down, buy a house, you're good to go. Well, that isn't how it works. And that's basic financial education, basic financial literacy skills. I said, why are we teaching kids that they've got to be tested on the rate of speed from Boston to Albany versus the rate of speed from Boston to Philadelphia, when they really need to know if the value of their house goes down, their payments go up? And so we set up this office to address financial education, which was lacking and continues to be lacking in Massachusetts. We do not have mandatory financial literacy programs in the schools. We wanted to address the wage gap because, and we've done significant work on that, but because it's not a woman's issue. I literally knew I was onto something when I said to a construction worker, he said to me, well, what's your issue? And I said, wage equality. And he said, that's my issue. And I kind of looked at this guy and went, this is your issue? I have a wife and 3 girls. None of them are paid what they're worth, and it all falls on me. So to address wage inequality and break down that barrier, to address financial literacy, and then get to the underpinnings of students being able to get through an educational pipeline quickly with less debt to fill the jobs that are here in Massachusetts that are going to give you the career path that will support your being able to live here. So that was basically the idea behind the Office of Economic Empowerment. And we've been working at it for 6 years now, and we've done a tremendous amount. And I think what I'll do is stop now and allow you to ask me questions about it.
So thank you, Treasurer. Actually, a couple questions about that. One is, I know one of those programs includes a bank account for when a child is born. Can you explain how that works and what that means?
So we looked at the underpinnings of the challenges to saving. This is all part of financial education and financial understanding. But we also did over at MSBA, and this is how I've integrated the work of my offices, is we did a job study, and we saw that there were lots of jobs out there that if you went into the right vocational or technical training track or community college or college, there are jobs, and they're going to be here at least for the next 20 years, but they required post-secondary education. However, as you know, we all know, because we read it all the time, kids are not being able to get that education or complete that education. They're working 2 jobs. Sometimes even the family is working extra jobs to help the kids get through that. Then they have to stop their education. And that's what we've been hearing about during the pandemic, because they can't afford to continue. And so we're essentially harming our own economy by not addressing this issue. Now, obviously it takes federal law, it takes state law, but one thing I knew from data that was already out there is that if we can get to kids early, and we did a pilot first, and we learned so much from the pilot. We started with kindergarten, and we did it in Worcester, and we did middle school in 5 gateway cities, including Worcester, and then 1 suburban community. And we wanted to be able to seed, and only $50, believe it or not, seed in a public-private partnership, not with taxpayer dollars, but in a public-private partnership, seed savings accounts for either college or vocational and technical training, and begin early. But the critical piece to this is it gave us access to the families to wrap financial education around the child and their family, on savings, on planning, on even retirement savings. And the pilot was so successful that we worked with DPH in order to start it off, because we thought this gives you 5-6 more years, started off at birth and have a checkbox on the birth certificate. There is literally today a checkbox on the birth certificate. Yes, I want to join the baby step savings plan. And then we work with the families to sign them up for a 529 account over at MIFA. And we begin with our financial literacy training around them and their families. Now, several states have similar programs. And what we're seeing, I know it doesn't seem possible, but it's true. Families can save less than $500 over the course of these years, and yet they are more likely to go, more likely to graduate, and less likely to accumulate debt. It's a win-win. It's a win for the families. It's the win for our businesses. It's actually win-win-win. It's a win for the state economy. And so it began in January. Now, timing is everything. We kicked it off in January 2020. We had intended a statewide marketing campaign, including me, with a group of people going to every hospital in the state to talk to the birth certificate coordinators and doctors and staff so that we could ensure that as many families, I mean, when you've just delivered a baby, you're a little overwhelmed. You might not notice nor understand this little checkbox. And so, of course, after only going to 2 hospitals, bam, that was over. So we moved everything online, but assumed that this year would not indicate to us the potential long-term success of the program. Wrong. We were oversubscribed than what we had anticipated. And we're still, because you can sign up till over a year, up to a year after your baby is born or adopted, because it is for birth children or adopted. It is for foster care, and it is for obviously adopted and naturally born children. And we are still getting enrollments in from last year. And so it's been enormously successful. And the concept is, until somebody, a legislature or the federal government, provide free education, it has to be paid for. We need it. And I think that the pandemic has shown it even more so.
Good. So Lindley, and thank you for that. Let me back up and ask you a little more about this wage equality issue that you mentioned. You talked about the construction worker. So there's obviously an education component. Is there any enforcement component, or what? How do you actually?
So we started prior to the wage equality law, the pay equity law that was passed. We did a multifold effort in terms of helping people. We have a website, Equal Pay MA, never forget the MA, equalpayma.com. And in it, we created a letter that people could send to their bosses after they did a wage calculator and saw how much less they were making than people in comparable jobs. And we also had a questions and answers for businesses and how they could evaluate if they had, through unconscious bias, created wage inequity, for example. And when I was trying to explain to people how these things happen unconsciously, I talk about, very simply, pink and blue jobs. And up until they've replaced a lot of these people with pay machines, a parking garage was a wonderful example. You would go into the parking garage and there'd be valet parkers. Typically, if you park with the valet parker because the garage is full, that happened all the time when I was trying to go to somebody's office in downtown Boston. When they get your car back for you, you usually give them $1. You feel like you need to give them a gratuity. That's the guys. The women are in the booth when you hand the ticket and pay. Very simple. The guys are making more money than the women. They're all there at minimum wage, but the guys are taking home more money. There's your blue job. There's your pink job. And that happens in a much more complicated way. So we created a questions and answers for businesses, why this matters to them and why, how they go about looking at it and thinking about this differently. We did an internal audit as soon as I arrived at the treasurer's office to uncover wage inequality throughout the organization. And what we found is that we had very little, because I had done a lot of hiring in and I had hired in people at a wage. And, but what we did find is some of the people who'd been there already, both people of color and women, were at lower wages, some of them. And I'll give you an example of why we did wage negotiation workshops and why we've tried to empower women. A perfect example is at one of the areas under the treasurer's office, we had posted for a position. I'm going to give you two examples in the same agency. One was we had posted for a position and it was down to 2 finalists. One was a woman of color. She happened to be more qualified. One was a woman who was Caucasian. The Caucasian woman asked for more money than the more qualified woman of color. These are cultural barriers that people have experienced throughout their lives. And we incidentally hired the woman of color. She was far more qualified and paid her what the Caucasian woman asked. Same organization, interviewing people, came up with the most qualified person. Now, this is where the new law comes into play. We had posted the job at a certain salary range. The woman who was applying had been at a much lower salary range. The head of that agency came to me and said, well, she wasn't making this much money before. We could save money by offering her less, and it's still a nice bump for her. I said, what is the range of the salary? They repeated it. I said, that's what you're paying her. Because women have historically made less money. Now, why does it matter to business people? I'm going to tell you why. Perfect example. And it brings in all the programs that I'm talking about all in one example. 2 Harvard MBAs, one's a guy, one's a girl. They get married. They are carrying so much debt, you have no idea, between college and between going to Harvard Business School. And they get married and they know they've got all these student loans to pay off. So they just rent an apartment and they decide they can afford one car because one of them has to commute out to 128 while the other one can walk to work. They decide they want to have a kid. Meanwhile, by the way, they're not eating out a lot and they're not spending a lot of money. We business people like people to have money in their pockets because they're paying down debt. And so they go to buy a house and they're barely qualifying. They've had practically no opportunity. And yet, as their careers are moving, he's making more money than she is. Because when they go to have the kid, the venture capital firm that she works for kind of says, well, we don't do flex time. Now, I'm going to tell you as a woman, when you have kids and you have a full-time job, you work 7 days a week. You're as effective multitasking as anyone who goes into the office from 7 to 7. And so they put her into marketing and she says to herself, well, okay, that'll give me the opportunity to be home more often. So what happens is, and I found this very much in the financial services business and in the big law firms, women are getting moved because they're making less money. And if they're in the same jobs, they're also not getting cut the cream of the crop clients or the best deals. So these are the kind of things we're educating businesses on, because what we're finding is companies that can support families have less turnover and are more financially successful. Whether in my office, right away, I established 12 weeks paid parental leave. I don't call it maternity leave. It is for men and women. And one of the men came up to me and said, I am so grateful for this because my wife is a resident at Mass General Hospital and they're only giving her 2 weeks off. So this is to support families. It's to keep economic stability, and it's for our economy. And companies that can maintain this level of diversity within their ranks are more, and this is data driven, McKinsey, Pew, State Street are more financially successful. So everything I'm talking about all weaves together. We're just breaking it off in pieces and helping address different parts of the problem, but it all comes together in the end.
So another question about the wage equity, and you mentioned that example of the car garage worker, the two garage workers. And this may be not as much a gender wage equity issue, but in a restaurant situation, in restaurants, and you're in the front of the house, you're eligible for tips. In the back of the house, you're not eligible to even share those tips, even if you wanted to, and the restaurateur can't do that. Is there a way to address that?
So I'm Greg. So you and I have seen that the whole restaurant industry, in fact, I think there was a big article in the Globe within the last week or so about them all sitting down and saying, we've got to really look at this. Mm-hmm. I mean, our back of the house workers have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. They're the ones who get paid the least. I know some of the restaurants, because I ordered in a lot of food and I have become great at ordering. I tried the cooking route for a long time, but as I got busier and busier with work, I didn't have as much time to do that because my husband thinks dinner is a bologna sandwich when he makes it. So we can't go that way. I've noticed that a lot of the restaurants are now doing a kitchen charge, which I think is terrific. The issue on how these wages are set up is a legislative one, but I agree with you that there needs to be more equity and also less reliance on the gratuities for the staff. Maybe I don't have the data in front of me to do sort of a textbook consulting job on how restaurants can make the same kind or more profit for themselves by structuring pays differently. But I think given the fact that they're having such a hard time getting people to come back to work for them, and you're really seeing it in the Cape and in the islands, they're basically crippled because they have the added problem of the cost of housing. there's got to be a whole step back and look at the structure of how restaurants operate and how people are paid in the restaurant environment.
Right.
And that would be legislators and businesses working together, or businesses working together to figure it out.
Right. And obviously, you're absolutely right. It is a big problem in the Cape and the islands, but it's a big problem in our suburban communities too, where there is no, the housing and transportation are both a challenge. A submitted question for you. Can you talk about efforts to train women for jobs in the building trades so that they can get jobs at livable wages?
So we are, we don't do job training, nor do we have any capacity to fund job training. What we do is try to, we have communicated with the trades a great deal. The one area where we work with them is in the Mass School Building Authority. That's the only, and also my touch point would be Clean Water Trust, where I actually went before a bunch of, and I'm going to tell you, it was 98% men who put the pipes under the ground. It's a whole construction group. And I talked to them about why it's so important to create these opportunities for women, that ultimately they want their local communities to be successful. And so the women who come into their local businesses, and by the way, I reminded them that businesses in local communities pay commercial taxes. And that's important to their tax base, because otherwise it falls on their real estate tax in every local community. So that was sort of the angle I use with building trades, is that you personally will benefit from women making more money, because you will have better customers. I bring it right back to my business experience and my feelings, how basic this all is, that they in their local communities want to have better commercial tax income, and therefore their local businesses need to not go out of business.
Got it. So let's go back and talk a little bit about COVID and the pandemic, and you mentioned your takeout experience. But you also had COVID this year.
Yes, I did.
You all right?
I'm okay now. Sadly, I really was a long hauler, so I totally get what that means. I guess I'm kind of tough because I got COVID over a weekend, and on Monday, I actually did a webinar, same as this, and everyone says they couldn't tell, but I guess I just pushed myself through. I have to say, anyone who thinks COVID isn't scary or that it's not something to avoid really doesn't know. I don't want to be rude. I was going to say they don't know what they're talking about. However, every morning that you wake up, you wonder if that's the day all of a sudden your lungs are going to shut down. And I knew people who were hospitalized who were a lot younger than I am. Two people who I've worked with who were in their 30s ended up hospitalized, unable to breathe. And I was fortunate. My doctor and my husband's doctor, my husband got it at the dentist, by the way, and that's how I got it, because I was quarantined. I mean, I was working remote. We both had antibody infusions, and we both believe that had we not had antibody infusions, we might have been hospitalized ourselves. And the kind of side effects that I experienced up until me having the vaccines, and that was only recently, because if you have antibody infusions, you have to wait 90 days. I felt like my heart had been damaged. I had to have an EKG, it showed nothing, but the 35-year-old that I also know felt her heart had been damaged. So I had lots of little symptoms for a very long time. And I pushed through them and worked full time. And by working full time, to me, that's 7 days a week. However, it was not fun, and it is scary. And when I first heard about the vaccine, like everybody else, I was initially, oh, do I really want a vaccine that's just popped up so quickly and maybe isn't tested? I couldn't wait to get the vaccine. At the point that I got it, my friends already were all vaccinated, and they were seeing people again and going to outdoor restaurants. And I was still trapped looking at the four walls. So I couldn't wait. And I'm glad I've done it now. And I hope everybody will get a vaccine. COVID is no joke. I had friends whose parents died. I know people who became very, very sick. And I'm going to tell you, I felt crummy, underlined in bold.
So one of those ideas out there is this idea of a vaccine lottery. And I'd love to know what your opinion is, but maybe you could explain to people, is it happening in other states? How would a vaccine lottery even work? And then you can tell us whether, as the head of the lottery commission, you would be in favor of such an idea.
Well, I'm not going to make a public statement as to whether I'm in favor. What I will say is that we did a lot of research on it because the governor's office asked us to after he had a conversation with the governor of Ohio. What's interesting about it is it's not really a lottery. It's a sweepstakes. And because people enter and then the numbers are drawn. And a lottery is you go out and you buy a ticket and you're part of a random ticket. We have been looking at all the options with the governor's office and where the lottery might come into play with them in supporting their efforts. And we're not Ohio. There's a lot more, there was a lot more vaccine hesitancy in Ohio and a great deal more rural communities. For example, I talked to the Alabama treasurer this past week, and he said they have a lot lower vaccine rate than we do, but they had less deaths because they're so rural. So it's been very hard to get people to get vaccinated, and they're working hard at it. He doesn't have the lottery in his office, so that's not something he was considering. California, what they've done is because DPH and their offices own the information on people who've been vaccinated, their Department of Public Health uploaded the information on every individual who'd been vaccinated into a site, and then they created a lottery that's a drawing. And I do want to say that I myself was excited, and if I were a parent that wanted a kid to have a full 4-year scholarship, having those scholarships in Ohio, I think will drive a lot of people to have their adolescent kids get the vaccine, which I think is a really good idea. And their numbers have gone up in Ohio. So this is something that the governor's office is talking to us about and what role the lottery could play. And if it all comes to being that the pieces can be put in place, it's not a bad idea because I want to get everybody vaccinated. But I read also again yesterday in the Globe, how small and big things, you have to come at this in a lot of different ways. Convenience. I think the Market Basket $25 gift certificates helped. A man was saying he went a couple times to get a vaccine, but he had to get back to work, so he couldn't stand in line. So I think everything that every local community and every business can do to help support making sure that we get people vaccinated. I think the thing that people need to remember is just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean you're 100% safe. There still are breakthrough cases of COVID, and we won't be able to achieve total herd immunity if we don't have everyone vaccinated. So you can live in Needham and Newton, which has very high vaccination rates, but if people working in Needham and Newton are coming in from areas that don't have high vaccination rates, they can transmit it to you, and you might not get sick, but you could transmit it to your child. And that's why statistically they're seeing a huge increase in children and adolescents getting COVID, and some of them getting very sick. So it's in all of our interests to get everybody vaccinated, and it's in all of our interests from a health point of view, and it's all of our interests from a business and economic point of view.
So why wouldn't you say whether you support a vaccine sweepstakes or lottery? Why?
Greg, you've always been really good with the questions, haven't you? I think if it can all be done in a manner that fits, that's safe, that the data is safe, that we can get it done in a timely fashion under Massachusetts state law, then it would be something that I would be in favor of. It was my job to lay out the challenges. I wanted to make sure that people, if they're looking at something, are walking into it knowing what the challenges are going to be.
So you're saying you support it if the infrastructure was there to make it work? Is that
correct?
Yeah, okay. Let me ask you about, you mentioned meal delivery and eating, but I know your office also reported that during COVID, alcohol delivery increased 300%. Obviously, people were getting their beer and wine or other things delivered to them. Has that slowed down? Is that still a big trend that people are getting home delivery alcohol?
Well, I haven't gotten my monthly report yet. So the switch just got turned on May 29th. Mm-hmm. So I probably won't have that data for a few more weeks. Mm-hmm. Let's suffice to say that for the package stores who had lots of challenges prior to COVID, actually a lot of them have done well across the pandemic. One of the challenges for mom and pop package stores has been the big supermarket, big box retailers who are able to generate more volume and have less profit. So it's been very good for the package stores. I know there's a controversy out there and that it's still in discussion about whether delivery should still be allowed to be made. As of today, they cannot be. I think it's tomorrow. They can no longer deliver cocktails. And I think that did help the restaurants. The restaurants have not recovered yet. And I feel that we've tried to do a great deal over at the ABCC. One restaurant owner called me personally and talked to me about their insurance and how the insurance is supposed to cover when they're open, but they're not open. We immediately worked with the legislature and let them, put it all on hold. We've done lots of little things in terms of bill paying for restaurants and those in the liquor business, payment plans so that they would not have to struggle so much. Fortunately, some of them did get resources from the federal government. But one thing that the ABCC has to focus on, it is our mandate, is safety. So we have to ensure, and we are focused on this, that underage drinking does not take place when alcohol is being delivered.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question about that, because the legislature, hopefully the House today, will make a decision about to-go drinks to extend it. But where did ABCC inspectors find this program was abused? Did we find that the drinks were going to minors? Were there problems reported with that?
We found obviously there's always some of that.
Yep.
So yes, but we found the kind of abuse that we saw over the course of the year were violations of the governor's orders on crowding, on serving alcohol without food, with just under, I'm thinking of one place that we came into where it was all underage drinking. It was packed. There was no food. And this was during the governor's, restrictions. Those are the kind of things. I will tell you, 95% of the people did exactly what they were told to do. And what we've seen since the governor announced through today is we've seen a lot of compliance continuing, and people still being the business. I really give the business owners a lot of applause for trying to keep people safe. But I can share with you, we had an investigator walk into a restaurant bar someplace, and literally someone walked up and said, "There are no masks allowed in here," and ripped it off her face. These are some of the things that our people got put through. That woman was worried for a couple 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. So another question related to that, another emergency order is this outdoor dining order that would expire in August, but technically tomorrow. 60 days from there. So before the emergency order, the ABCC had a role in approving outdoor dining.
Right.
What's the argument for the ABC to have that roll back? Why do we need that state oversight? Why can't municipalities make the decisions about outdoor dining on their own?
Because the ABCC is a regulatory agency and we operate under a statute and regulations that the legislature writes.
Right, so, but why should we have, is there a benefit to that rule, or should that rule be changed? Should the legislature change that?
Well, from what I understand on the history of it, and as you know, locally, the Board of Selectmen were the licensing agency for restaurants. Part of it is, well, number one, in terms of outdoor seating, take Brookline, case in point. All they've got is the sidewalk. And now a lot of the outdoor seating is actually in the street. So there are public safety issues. When I drive around, I see a lot of it is pushed into the street now. I don't know if that's the case as much in Newton and Needham, but in Brookline and in Boston, it's for sure. And so I think that there should be a relook at outdoor seating. Part of it is the control of alcohol, and that's why it's in the ABCC area. You always have the area sectioned off. You want it under control. And that's the history of why it's part of.
Yeah, I understand the history, but do you think it makes sense? So should the state still have a role in that, or really can municipalities have that authority to be able to make those decisions on their own?
Well, I believe that the ABCC should continue to make sure that the public safety portion of it is in place. It's our mandate. They're going out to inspect the restaurant already. They may as well inspect the outside area too.
Right. Okay. And at one point, you predicted that as many as a third of retail alcohol beverages licensees might not renew. This was during the pandemic. Did that prove to be the case?
No, and I'm thrilled. It's a lot less. When I predicted that, we did not know there would be COVID relief funds. And so I believe that helped get a lot of people over the hump. I also believe that there was a pretty good program of purchasing gift cards from your favorite local restaurant. And I believe that was fairly successful. On the other hand, I know that there are some that have gone out, but I'm seeing them start to pop up again. So between that and also relief on rent and relief on bill paying and relief on insurance, along with the federal funds, we are really thrilled to see that it has not dropped off.
Do you have a sense of how many we have lost? If it wasn't a third, what is it?
Oh, I think it was we're still waiting for all the renewals to push through. But it was a lot less. I mean, significantly less. I don't want to throw a figure out there and be quoted on it without having it right in front of me.
Okay.
I could have had it for you, Greg, if you had given us all these questions ahead of time.
Let me actually just remind people, if anyone has a question they want to submit, to do that in the Q&A. We've got about 10, 15 minutes left. A question about supermarkets, your family business and where you spent an early part of your life. Did that experience give you a special appreciation for what those businesses and those workers had to go through during the whole 15 months in the quarantine?
So if you might recall that I was on the picket line with the Stop and Shop workers 2 years ago when they had a strike against Royal A-Hold. But I also was on the picket line with them several years before that. It didn't get as much press because it didn't go on as long. First of all, for everyone out there, my family did not sell Stop and Shop. My family went through a hostile takeover by Goldberg Kravis in 1988. And when my mother's great-grandmother started that business, it was to be a family business, and that meant families everywhere. And in fact, if you can talk to people today where 3 generations of their families worked in the same store. So when this hostile takeover took place, it was a blow not just to us, but to Massachusetts, because we gave 100% health insurance, not just to full-timers, but part-timers too. And so I feel a deep connection. And believe it or not, there are a lot of workers there that when I'm out on the picket line, they're running towards me yelling, Debbie. So that tells you how long they've known me if they're calling me Debbie. I am a member of the union, UFCW 1445, and I'm still a member. Although there are other locals that claim I'm an honorary member, but that's okay. And so I feel enormous emotional connection to all the workers, and particularly those who are owned by international companies who don't really think about the day-to-day life and work of the workers in the store. I worked in the Roslindale store all through my senior year in high school. I had to wait until I had my driver's license, and I worked on the floor, and I know the job that people do. And in fact, after I graduated, worked 5 years for somebody else because I went and worked for other people. But after I went to Harvard Business School and BC Law School, I was back as a buyer at Bradley's. So this is not like I was some fancy executive in a big office. One of the things about my family was keep it real. And in keeping it real, it's all about the people that work with you. And it was all about the people of Massachusetts. We had 50,000 employees, and you impact 50,000 employees and their families' lives by not giving them the kind of pay they deserve, by not giving them the kind of health insurance they deserve, by not giving them the benefits that they deserve. You're affecting the Massachusetts economy. And so my empathy for frontline workers everywhere was really intense. And in another role that I have, besides having been president of all the treasurers, I'm also chair of the Democratic treasurers. And a lot of workers groups from across the country asked us to take a public position on supporting them, their health being safeguarded, be it in a meat plant or a chicken plant or in a retail operation. And so this was a very tough time for people. And the people who were disproportionately impacted by illness and death were people of color. And a lot of them are frontline workers. So I learned to use Instacart, or Peapod, even if I had to wait a week to 10 days to get my groceries. And I gave very large gratuities to those people willing to take a risk on my behalf.
Let me ask you a question about the lottery, and I actually don't know where this is, but the governor's budget proposal would have authorized the use of debit cards, but not credit cards for lottery ticket purchases. I'm not sure where the House and the Senate ended up on that. Maybe you could tell me that, and then tell me where you are and what you would like to see.
So this was one of our priorities is, look, where do people live today? Right here. Mm-hmm. How much cash, how many times did you go to the cash machine in the last year?
Not very many.
Right. Now, I'm going to be candid. I'm not going to sell a lottery ticket on a credit card. I'm not having anyone go into debt buying lottery tickets. However, if you have expendable cash that you presently have and you want to buy a lottery ticket, I will support debit cards. And that I feel it begins to bring the lottery into the 21st century. There are lotteries all over the country that have online lottery. Right next door to us in New Hampshire, and they made millions of net profit during the pandemic. Let's not forget that my lottery people are frontline workers, and we had to safeguard their health during this time. And everything is a cash transaction. So what about all of those small convenience stores, all of those small one gas station owners with their little mart inside? They were relying in terms of being able to sell lottery products on cash transactions, which put them at risk. And so I feel that a debit card is a very reasonable and appropriate accommodation when we look at both modern day world and this and uh, and the fact that we've dealt with a pandemic, which will not be the last one in our lifetimes.
And is that actually in the bill that's in the conference committee now? It's not in the budget. Okay. What's the right number of years to be treasurer? How long is the right?
Well, if we start with Bob Crane, I believe he was around 27, 28, 29 years. I am not, I didn't start off young enough to match that. But one thing that I have found, because the treasurer, it's really not a political job. It's much more of a CEO job in making sure that different areas of state government run well. And I'm the first treasurer since Bob Crane to continue in this role. Many people thought it was a really good place to move on from, but they did not spend the time to understand and make sure that each area was functioning at its maximum. This is me being a business person again. Some of you may recall, because it would have been in Newton and Needham, that a congressional seat opened up. And there was not just speculation. I sat down with Matt Stout from the Globe on the day I was rolling it all out. But I got up at 7 in the morning and said, I'm not running. And I wasn't running because I wasn't walking away from the work and leaving all my work incomplete. Perfect example is the Baby Step Savings Plan. We didn't announce its statewide rollout until January 2020, which was after I would have been announcing the congressional seat. I get things done, and I get things done for people here in Massachusetts. The idea of being in Washington didn't seem really in sync with my personality of not getting things done for people. And but I think there were those out there who understood that each area under the treasurer's office is like a functional organization that needs to be managed and managed to the next level and really perform at the highest levels. I think MSBA is a really strong example. It's to have Greg Sullivan, the former Inspector General, to consistently say, as far as he's concerned, it's one of the best authorities in the state, well-run authorities. But it takes effort to do that, and it's what I was trained to do. If we had not gone through a hostile takeover, I'd be running Stop and Shop, and it would be a much better employer in this state than it is today. So what's the right number? I don't know what the right number is.
And are you running for re-election next year and a half from now?
We will see, won't we?
Well, then let me ask you this. What other jobs do you like?
This is my favorite job. I love what I do. I called Bob Crane the morning after I won. And he said to me, you've got the best job in America. And you know what? It is interesting. It is stimulating. You can do so much for so many people. So many areas under it apply to experience that I've had and what I've been trained to do. The fact that I've been able to take it nationally with the National Association of State Treasurers. I'm also the co-chair of the National Institute of Public Finance. We're making a difference, and making a difference in life has been a family value for generations. And so what more could I ask for? I'm using the capacity within myself to do good things.
So then why won't you say if you're running for re-election?
Because it's all right, I'll just give you a time frame.
Okay.
I announced that I was running for re-election 3.5 years ago in February of election year. February 2018, I announced for the 2018 election. I just think this is really early. And I think the reason why everyone's talking about it is A, because of the mayor's race, which is lots and lots and lots of press, and B, because there's so much speculation on who's running for governor. But I don't really think people care yet whether or not I'm running for re-election.
Do you want to be governor sometime?
I have no interest in being governor. I'd have to be handed it, but I don't think I want to be governor. I like what I do. I love what I do.
Thank you so much for your time. I have one more question for you, and only because I've been thinking about this the entire time we've been talking. There is a bottle of wine just over your shoulder there. You'll have to tell us what that is.
I don't drink.
Okay.
That's one of the jokes. Treasurers get up and say, "What? Tell us something unusual about your office." I go, "I have the Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission under me. I don't drink. I have I have cannabis under my office. I don't smoke. I have the lottery under my office, and I don't gamble." And they'd all laugh because they thought it was, first of all, they couldn't believe those three things were under my office. Let's start with that, because none of them have that. We actually have the most amount of areas in the entire country under the Massachusetts State Treasurer's Office. So that's my husband's. Do you want me to get it and read?
It just happens to be there. It's not like symbolically placed there, representing.
No, I'm sitting at the dining table.
Okay, I just
and so it's a funny label, DAOU. Have you ever heard of that?
No, but
me neither.
There I was thinking it had some great symbolic value. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
It's great to see you, Greg.
Great, you too.
And it's great to be here with all of you.
Great.
One of the things I just have to give a quick pitch before, because we do have 4 minutes. Women have been seriously disproportionately impacted by COVID. I'm going to share a statistic that has going to shock you all. And in December, men made gains with jobs. 150,000 women left the workforce. No men. Men made gains. I ask you as business people to try to make a concerted effort to hire women and to pay them what they're worth. And I've actually hoped, and I'm trying to get some of the legislature out there to look at the use of federal funds to provide childcare, because a lot of the childcare operators were driven out of business. And the only way we're going to get our workforce back to work, and in an equitable way, and you've heard that word equity thrown around a lot, but please remember, those are your customers. You want your customers to have money in their pockets. And so please help us with this shecession, because it's real. And just telling you 1 month statistic is shocking. And so think about that. Think about that. It will benefit you personally. And it's not just a social imperative. It is a business imperative. So thank you.
Very well said. Thank you very much, Treasurer, for being with us today. Thanks to everybody who's been watching. Thanks to Fidelity Bank for sponsoring us all. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.